Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you all are ready for today because it's going to be a fun, exciting uh, lab activity. Um, Before that, I want to remind you all that today, as the last two lab activities were, will not be worth a weekly submission, but it's the last lab activity that we're going to be doing, and it's going to be worth 5%, and it's going to be due Monday night. It will be open if you are a little late, but I'd recommend you to get it done at least definitely today because by the time we finish today, it shouldn't be too much. It's just a lot of different tools we're going to be experimenting with within Unity. But I recommend you all to finish it today so you don't have to worry about this over the weekend. This is, once again, not worth the weekly submission. It is a separate activity. So you'll see on our lab activities tab on Canvas, you'll see there are some new options available. There's lab activity 3, grass, grass, grass. And there are also these two different meshes, or this one mesh and then this texture available. This was from the terrain activity we worked on last week. It was not mandatory, but today's, if you don't have a terrain and texture available from last week that you worked on, you can use the one I worked on last week because we will be needing that for making the grass on. And I'll show you within Canvas here, you will see there is this grass activity that has been published at 11. It was on a timer. So we can quickly go through it here. We're gonna make this stylized looking grass here. And it's very straightforward, it's very fun, and it's very optimal. So it will run really well in your games as long as you do the procedures we're gonna do the right way. And it looks pretty simple. It's not too jarring. We'll have a simple shader graph set up. So this is very, very simple shader graph stuff we're doing today. No need to fret. And then we're going to be also creating this simple texture, this alpha clipping texture within Substance Painter. And then our model is literally going to look like this, right? This is what the grass model should look like because we're trying to make a very optimal piece of grass that can render many, many, many times, right? And so this will be available on Canvas to look at, as well as there is the terrain mesh I have available. If you haven't worked on it, if you don't have the terrain from last week, you can download this one for today, as well as the texture. And while we are creating the grass itself, I created this test image texture to make sure your UVs are oriented properly so that the grass is oriented properly. That's a lot to throw on you at once, but I recommend we're going to be using the test image as we go on. I'll showcase it, and then you can just download it here and then put it in your Blender file to test out the UVs. And then the slides are also right here. So, grass, grass, grass. One of my favorite things to work on in 3D modeling and environment art because it really enhances your environments and your set pieces so well. The assessment, real quick, I'm gonna give you a 1 point for the optimized grass mesh with the black and white vertex coloring that I'll showcase for you all, and then proper normals, which will help the grass model look good and set like and realistic within the scene. 1 point for Substance Painter Alpha Clip texture with the proper imports. And then we'll have 1 point for the shader graph and polybrush utilized to the full extent that we cover in here. I will showcase how those tools work, don't worry. 1 point for integration and presentation of the scene within Unity. And then 1 whole point for any creative additions you add to your grass. This could be differences in the alpha clipping texture, different shader parameter tweaks. Maybe you make your scene look really pretty and then showcase that to me, etc. All right, grass in games. What is this? So, grass or foliage greatly enhances our worlds. And you can see this is a screenshot from Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I'm pretty sure it's Breath of the Wild. And you can see the grass here. It's there's not much going on the terrain here, but that grass really enhances the the feel of this environment so much. And there's one tree in the background, and there's a giant mountain in the far background, but up close, literally 90% of what you see is just grass, right? And so it's really important for big environments when you're doing those specifically, you can reduce the flatness and add variation to your terrain through grass. And it's very fun to make. Grass has a very specific workflow to get right, I found from my experience. Small missteps can cause your grass to look dramatically different. And it's important we get this right to get a look that we want for our specific games, right? So in this example I have provided, you can see on the left here, this is one tutorial I saw online where the grass, it looks much more realistic and kind of wet, I kind of perceive it as, which is fine for some more realistic games. But for our use case, we're probably going to go for something more on the right, where it's a little more painterly, a little more seamless with the ground itself, because our dioramas are not supposed to be PBR with super realistic. I don't think that's part of this curriculum. Here's my personal example from 2 years ago, so second year. I was really excited to work on grass, and I used pretty much the exact same workflow, plus some extra technical art integrations. But the main thing was that this grass had that dual plane sort of uh, look right there, and it used these four different alpha clipping textures, and it was really cool because what I did was I figured out how to, depending on where you placed it, it would randomize which of those grass textures it would use. So it'd be much more variance, as if it wasn't already hard to see the variance already. It really added a lot of immersiveness to the environment, which I really was inspired by to keep working on this project, right? So here's a screenshot of without grass. It looks fine. And honestly, this could have been what I ended up with, but it's kind of static. There's not much going on, not much movement, right? With the grass, here's a GIF I created. You can see that there's like this waviness I could also add, which we're not going to do today unless you want to continue with me afterwards. I'll keep adding to this grass texture, or this grass shader. But you see that waviness and just how much it adds to the feel of this space, right? Some little things like that make such a difference. And I think that's what's amazing about technical art, is that you can do such things like this super optimally and not too difficultly. So here's my 3D tip of the day, number 10, Ace Rolla. Ace Rolla makes incredible CG videos, including a video or a few of them on grass for games. So here's the video that I kind of was watching as I was making this, just because I've already watched it several times, but it's kind of just a fun little video. He just goes over the whole process of making grass differently than we're doing, but still a similar workflow with the two plain images on the mesh. And yeah, I recommend to check out Ace Rolla. He's really great for just anything related to computer graphics and games in general. So, our grass workflow. Let's dig into what we're going to be doing today. Our apps that we're going to be using in this order will be Blender, Substance Painter, and then Unity, right? So we're going to be modeling the optimized grass first. We're going to be creating the alpha clipped grass mask. And then we're going to be creating the scene and creating that simple shader within Unity. So we have this full workflow that we have sort of worked up to throughout this entire semester. The Unity packages that we'll be using, only 2, and they are free. So we'll be using Polybrush. Polybrush was a tool that I found that was great for easily painting the grass onto whichever mesh we specify. And the difference is that it's for custom meshes that we're going to create, not the Unity terrain tool. The Unity terrain tool is its whole other beast that we are not going to be covering today, just because we created our own terrain that we're going to be using. And this also requires Unity 2018.3 or later, which I assume most people would have. And we're also using URP. So make sure your project is a URP or else shader graph won't be working, I'm pretty sure. Shader graph will allow us to take our grass texture and add some cool procedural texture effects, very simple stuff, and it's going to look really good. So I can't wait to start doing this. Main things to look out for is our mesh data. Once again, those two simple meshes. The normals are set upwards, which I'll show you how to do. Our vertex colors are set black at the bottom and then white at the top. This will act as a mask that we can then add colors to. I'll show you how to do that as well. And then our pivot point near the bottom of our grass mesh. We're going to make sure our texturing is correct. So we're going to be using the opacity channel within Substance Designer or Substance Painter. And then we're going to be exporting in the Unity URP template. And then also finally our shader, we're going to make sure our shading is using the proper nodes and it is a URP based project. So this will be all, I'm leaving all this as well on the slide so that you can refer back to it in case you get confused. We're going to be making these two planes, and then we're going to add this data transfer node, which we can take that third plane, which has its upwards facing normal, and then we can add that to the grass texture here. And what that's going to do, or the grass mesh here, and what that's going to do is it's going to make those normals not sideways, but upwards. And it's going to look much better for the grass. And then obviously Substance Painter, we're going to be having our opacity instead of a color, just to practice that proper exporting workflow from Substance Painter into Unity. And then this is our simple Unity shader graph setup, right? So we're going to be adding that alpha clipped opacity grass texture to the bottom right here. And then we're going to use those vertex colors that we sort of specify in Blender to then blend between two colors, as you can see up there as well. So let's make this. Let's have fun. All right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start in Blender. So if you haven't already, make sure you open up Blender. And actually, to sort of have things running in the background ahead of time, to have things downloaded and everything, I want you to open up a Blender project, or sorry, a Unity project that you're going to be making this grass within. So I already had this Dr. Hoke shader sandbox that I do all of my work in within Unity now, just because I don't want to make a ton of projects. But within, if you're making a brand new project, let's say, when you make a new project, make sure it's a newer version, of course. And then you have it on Universal 3D Core. That one will ensure all the packages we use will work. Right? And then as well, once you get your project open, ready to go, we're going to go to Window up here. And if you get a little behind, make sure you can check the slides and everything as well. We're going to go to Package Manager here, right? And within Package Manager, if we type Poly, you'll see this add-on here called Polybrush. And this is what we're going to be using to paint our grass texture or our grass mesh onto our terrain here. So you're just going to install that. And then shader graph. Yeah? It might be a different location for the package manager. Yeah. You got Polybrush? Good. That's all good. Yeah, I haven't really touched it much yet. I'm still kind of in the older versions. And then we're also going to get Unity shader graph. And this, you need URP. I keep specifying it, but URP should be the Unity version or the Unity project type that you should be using anyway, just because it has the good lighting and good shader workflow. So yeah. polybrush, shader graph. Oh, wait a second. And you'll notice that when you first install Polybrush, it might take a little bit to compile within your project. Just let it kind of do its thing. And then we'll come back to this later. So we're just gonna leave this project for now. And we're gonna head back into Unity. So I'm gonna open up my Grasp project here. And I already worked on like this little bit of stuff here earlier. So I'm just gonna call this pre-tut. Take the mannequin out. I'm just gonna hide that for now. Oops. There we go. And it's always good to have your references within the scene. If you haven't already, make sure you get this mannequin scale model from the canvas. I believe Marcus provided it in one of the weeks. It's good to have this because this will be at the right scale. And then we can create our grass within a scale range that makes sense. So if I create a new collection, I'll call this grass. And I'm going to click Shift A, Mesh, Plane. We have a plane. We are close to halfway done our grass mesh. So what we can do is, to make sure we're orienting this the right way, we can go into our shader here, our material here. We can create a new material on our grass material or our grass mesh. And then we are going to go to Canvas. And we're going to download this test image that I provided within the lab activities here. Right? I don't want you to have to make your own test image, so this will save you time. And then now, with that downloaded, if we click on the yellow dots here on our base color, yes.
I don't think it's showing anything for this week.
Is it not?
No.
It's going to be under the lab activities. Yeah. Yeah. Should I put it under week 10, you think? Yeah, as well, because this is a separate thing. This is the weekly activity. I think I'll do it as well, just to avoid confusion. That makes sense. Yeah, so it's under the lab activities. It's all good. Yeah, and so we're going to create a new image texture by clicking on this yellow dot here, right? And then in there, we can then open an image, right? And then add that test image in. And you won't see it right away. It's gonna be kind of blank because we gotta change our material preview. Change the material preview here. And all this is doing is just making sure that when you then go into edit mode and then you rotate it along the x-axis, that you're making sure it's oriented upwards like that, right? That's how we want our plane to be. And I'll try to go a little slower today because there's a lot of things to keep track of for this. So, yep, make sure you create a new material and then add the test image to that, like so. And then from there, while we're in edit mode again, with the mesh fully selected, we are going to Shift D and then just right click to leave it as is. And so now there are two meshes on top of each other. We're just going to RZ90, like that. And this is ideally what your plane should be looking like, right? And first thing I notice is they're a little big. We want to make them a little smaller, something that would be realistic compared to the size of this mannequin model here. So if I go into edit mode and then S to scale it down, I'm going to eyeball it about this tall. So I'm imagining it about the same height as up to the mannequin's knee. I think that makes sense. It's like tall wild grass, I'm picturing, right? Oops, there we go. And then while in edit mode, also, you're going to GZ up a little bit. And you'll notice that I'm leaving it slightly underneath the origin, just because I don't want this grass to clip over top or like a little bit over the grass or the terrain. I want this grass to be underneath the terrain slightly, right? So because I did all that in edit mode, the scale is still 111, which is very important. Remember that. If it's not 111, you can just Control A, apply scale. And also my pivot is still at 000. You can see the location is 000, right? It's very important to have this grass mesh scale 1, location 0, rotation 0. The dimensions here don't matter. That's just globally the size of it, right? And two more steps. We are going to create a new mesh. Shift A. We're going to create a plane, right? Let me take a sip.
No, sorry.
Yep.
For the grass, are you making uh like you have the plane, and then are you just like alting it, or are you inside of it like just shifting?
It's shifting within the mesh. Yeah, that's good to specify. So this is all one single mesh. And what I did was when I was in edit mode, I shifted to make a new geometry within the object because we want as few draw calls, as few GPU, problems as we can get, keep everything as optimal for our shader as we can, right? This is how to make proper grass for games. Say, yeah, tot gauge, tots gauge. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. But yeah, now we have our plane here, and you'll notice if I go back into the just the regular viewport shading, there is this very evident light plane and dark plane, right? You'll see it as I turn it. Those are kind of jarring when you are seeing the grass shader or seeing the grass within Unity or within whichever engine you're using. It's going to look very fake and ugly with those weird shading issues. And that's what this plane's going to fix, right? What we can do is we can just bring that up a little bit and go in edit mode and just scale that down to about there, right? The main thing is that we have it around the center and just it's facing upwards, right? And by default, it's going to be facing upwards. If I show you the face orientation, you'll see the red is at the bottom, which means our normal is facing up, right? So normal is like this for that plane.
Why are you making like an actual plane on the?
I'll show you. So right now, these two planes this plane's normal is this way, and then this plane's normal is this way, right? And so that's, we want both those planes to be straight up, so that because our terrain's normals are always going to be facing up, we want our grass to also imitate that, so the shading is exact between the terrain and the grass. This is a bit technical, but trust me on this. This is how it's going to look nice. And so what we're going to do is we're going to select our grass mesh here. Also, I'm going to rename it. It's also very good to rename your meshes so they're not just plain in your viewport. Right? And so at this point, we're going to create a modifier. This is a fun one we haven't used before. If you go to the top here, you'll see one called data transfer. Data transfer is very fun, and it's not as scary as you think, because what it's going to do is we're going to copy the normals from our plane onto our grass mesh. So we can see this eyedropper tool here. We're going to click that eyedropper, and we're going to click on that plane facing upwards. Right? So I'll just open this up a bit. Right here, eyedrop, and eyedropping the plane. And then, if you look down, you'll see there is face corner data as one of the options. Turn that on. And then turn on custom normals. You'll see right, if you drop that down, custom normals. And you'll see right away, our grass changes its look dramatically. See? You'll see that when I turn custom normals on, it's going to look like a one flat shaded object, right? So there's no more weird blending between those two planes. And that is very, like, you'll see if I rotate this plane, it's kind of cool. The normals will change on that grass while this one moves as well. And this is the workflow for foliage, and it's very powerful, right? So just once again, modifier, edit, data transfer, eyedrop. So the source will be the plane, this plane right here, or not this one right here. Turn on face corner data, and then custom normals. And now, yep, the dark shading issue still. Oh, like when you rotate it like this way? That's okay. That's more of just the way Unity renders, or the way Blender renders things. The main thing is that it should look pretty flat from like one direction and then the same in the other direction. Right? You'll know the difference. And so now we have that. Last thing is we're going to add some simple vertex colors. And these vertex colors are not for actual coloring, but they're a mask instead. So I'll show you exactly what that will be in Unity, but for now we'll be in viewport shading mode, solid viewport shading mode, but then you're going to click on the shading option here and make sure it's set to attribute. So it's usually on material, set it to attribute. Is it? Yeah, make sure you're in solid viewport shading as well. We're going back, right? This version right here, the material preview, is just to see if our normals or our UV maps are proper with the test image. We're gonna go back to solid view though, up here, and then attribute on, and that will help us to see our vertex colors. Your question? Yeah. So for the sorry, excuse me, for the data transfer thing. Yeah. I noticed that when I spin my camera around the object, yeah, it'll kind of like this, right? Yeah, it's supposed to happen. It's just the way Blender renders it, the lighting. Yeah, yeah, you're doing it properly. Don't worry. This is a very technical topic, and I'm excited for all of you to make this grass and have that to use in your dioramas or projects or whatever. I can't wait. Yeah, and so we're going to do our vertex color workflow now. We're going to go Control Tab, Vertex Paint, and we already know that once we enter this mode, it's going to automatically create our vertex color attributes. And so we're going to set our color. It's probably already black by default. Make sure it's set to black. And then just paint the bottom like so. Right? And if you're not seeing this, once again, up here, viewport shading, solid, color, set to attribute. And what you'll notice is that our plane here has this dark part at the bottom and the white at the top. Let me get some thumbs up if we are all at this stage right now. Excellent, excellent. Okay, good. So if you did everything we just did now, that's one full point you get for your submissions. So congrats. Next thing is, this was probably the most technical thing to model so far, but now we're going to be making a simple alpha clipping opacity texture within Substance Painter. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our grass mesh and we're going to export this. So File, Export, FBX. All right, I'm going to create a new folder to put this all in. And remember, always limit to selected objects. So the object you're selecting will be exported only. And I like to go down to geometry and set the smoothing to face. That is just the common way to export, and it will avoid any shading issues. And you don't need to turn on animation, right? But yeah, selected objects is limited to, and then geometry, smoothing is face. Yep. No, that one we're leaving within Blender. Yeah. And those two grass planes should be one object. Yes, it should be one object. Yeah, the two crossed ones should be one object. Oh, what's going on? Oh wow. Okay. Well, I'd still have to keep. Yeah.
If we're not exporting the middle plane,
Yeah.
why exactly did we use it?
What the middle plane did was it just changed the normals of the two planes upwards, and we don't need it anymore, so we don't need to export it, right? But those changes, those modifiers that we put in Blender will just apply as we export. So we don't have to worry about applying the modifiers. So I'm just going to call this SM grass mesh 01, and I'm going to click export. Right? So we should be done with Blender now. I'm just going to save this. There we go. All right. Now part 2, we're going to be opening Substance Painter. Yep. Say it again?
Are the slides posted?
Yes. They are under the lab activities right now. Lab activity 3. Yeah, I should post them in the week 10 as well after this. But yeah, they are live. Can you see them?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. We're going to open Substance Painter now. And I guess while we're waiting for this to open, within the Blender, or within the, Unity scene, if you haven't already, just make sure, remember, Window, Package Manager, Shader Graph, and then Polybrush are the two packages you need. Just make sure of that, because it's going to take a while to load those sometimes. All right. In Painter, click File, New, and we're going to create the file for this grass plane. Template is going to be, this is important so that you can see what we're doing. It's going to be PBR Metallic Roughness Alpha Blend, which is the one we should be using already. But if you haven't done that, so make sure you select that. Make sure our document resolution is 1024. We don't need anything more or less. And then normal map format, OpenGL, because actually it doesn't matter because we're not using normals, but OpenGL is just the standard for Unity, so we'll use that anyway. We're going to make sure, especially, that our UV tile workflow is off, auto unwrap is off, import camera is off. Pretty much these are all off because we don't want our UVs that we specified to be overwritten. And then finally, open File, find where you place that export, and then click Export or Import. Go back. We are opening a Substance Painter file.
Already on it.
Excellent. These are what the parameters I set for it are. All right. And now we have this plane in Substance Painter. And I recommend, if you haven't already, if this is all you see, make sure you click up here on the top right. There is a 2D or 3D 2D tab, because we're going to want to be viewing both at the same time. Or you could just view the single 2D texture image like so. But this is where we're going to be making our hand-drawn grass. So, first thing, I'm going to delete the paint layer. And then I guess I can create a folder just to be organized. Call that grass. You have a diagonal line going through the plane? Really, it doesn't look like this? Interesting. Let me quickly check out. Yeah. We're pretty much just using. You could also use Photoshop actually, but we're just using Substance Painter to draw the black and white grass. So it doesn't really matter if the shading looks weird, as long as I'll show you. We're going to create a fill layer. Call this base. And then set this to black. Yes. There you go. And then one more fill layer. I'm gonna call this mask. And that one's just gonna be, I'm gonna set it to fully white. Right? The texture,
No texture.
it's just base color right now. See? So base is underneath mask. Base has black, mask has white. And on mask, we're gonna right click, and then we're gonna add a black mask. So we're adding a black mask to the white fill layer, and then the result is it should disappear, or it should turn black. And then underneath the black mask, we're gonna add a paint layer. See? And this is our entire painter setup pretty much. Yeah, that's all we're gonna be using. So base, white fill, all with color for now, and then black mask with paint. And you'll see I can just start drawing on our texture here, or on our 2D plane here, right? And we're making sure we're painting underneath the mask because this will allow us to change this material later. So just paint here, and this is where you just start being creative and create a really fun, simple grass texture image. So I'm gonna hold control and right click to change the size of my stroke here. And then you can change different parameters of your stroke here, like the spacing, you see, but I'm gonna leave it as default. You can change, I like changing the hardness a little sharper, right? We haven't really done much painting or drawing yet in this course, but just worry about creating a cool little grass like so. And don't worry about being super detailed or making it look good. The main thing is we're just creating grass, and it can look rubbish, but it doesn't matter. We're just gonna start drawing. Ideally a little thicker like this, not very thin, because when it's thin, it's easy to see through so much of it at once, and it kind of, you have to use more pieces of grass to fill the layer, the terrain, you know? So I'm just drawing simple grass out. Don't think too hard about it. Just draw it. This is not something to stay on. Like, this is not a step to stay on for so long. And my painting is all done under the paint mask. Remember, it's very important. Maybe this will be a thin one. Yeah. Right.
Are you doing this ultra mouse?
Say again.
Are you doing this ultra mouse?
Sorry, I missed that again.
Are you using a mouse?
Yeah, I'm using my mouse. Yeah. You can use your mouse for this. Right. If I was at home, I'd probably use my pad to do this, my drawing tablet. And then also there's, if you made a mistake, there's the eraser tool right here. So there's draw and then erase. So I can just shave off a little bit of that. Right. Simple. I think that's good for now for me. And you'll notice that, actually it's a little sharp at the top. Fix that. There we go. Mm, I'm going to control and then scroll the mouse wheel to just change the thickness a little bit. Yeah, that's good. All right, that's the grass. Very simple. And you'll see on the 3D viewport, we're going to see this very simple grass here. And this is what ideally we're going for. We're having these two uh, pieces of these two planes that are sort of crossing each other. This is the most optimal way to make game grass in my experience. So I'd say wherever your grass is looking right now, just leave that for now. We're going to keep moving on now. What we're going to do is we're going to change the now because we have the result we want, we can now change what these fill layers are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color fill layer, the black base one, to fully white because we don't want any sort of strange shading within our export because all of our data is going to be within the alpha channel. And so if I go to the next fill layer here, the top mask one, I could turn off color and then I could turn on opacity, which is OP right here, right? And you'll notice if I turn it down, it's going to alpha clip that section of our grass, but we don't want that. We want to leave our opacity of the top mask fully white. And in our base, we're going to create an opacity mask and set that to fully black. So on base, add an opacity layer, set that to 0. And then on mask, add an opacity mask and set that to 1. And the result would be this grass that you can see through like that. Very fun. Can I get some thumbs up if we are getting that? Say it again.
It's the OP.
Do you see OP? If you don't see OP, then you'll have to add it in texture set settings. So there's a tab here. For me, it's right here called texture set settings. You add a channel and you'll find opacity in here. Do you have it? Excellent. It's the slider, yeah. And so you'll set one for each base and mask. The one on base is set to 0. The one on mask is set to 1. It's working? Excellent. Sweet. All right, very straightforward texturing. This is what we're going to leave it as because all our shader is going to do is take that and then add the color to it, right? So at this point, I'm also going to save the file. Saved. And then File, Export Textures. And it's very important here to definitely set your directory accordingly. I'm going to set it to tutorial 10. Output template. This is quite important. Tune in for this. Output template, we're going to set that to Unity URP, Universal Render Pipeline, Metallic Standard. Right? We don't need to do this for this specific texture, but it's just good practice to use the proper export parameters or templates for the specific application we are using. And we could probably leave the rest of these as is. I might just turn dilation infinite to no padding because we are not repeating the texture beyond the borders. But yeah, main thing is output template, Unity Universal Render Pipeline Metallic Standard. And once again, what that's going to do is It's going to export 4 maps, which we really don't need the last 3. But the main thing is the base map here. This alpha channel of it will have our texture remade. And so now what we can do is click export. And now it exports those 4 textures into our directory that we placed it in. And now we should be ready to move into Unity. So this will be fun. We'll have to do a little bit of a setup to get our texture here working properly, or our terrain here working properly. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new folder here. Create. Yeah. Say it again. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So you have your texture like this. You have your base set to opacity 0. And then you have your mask set to opacity 1. Just remembering that's important. If you click File, Export Textures. The main thing is your output template is Unity Universal Render Pipeline. Do you see that? Do you get that, Lucas? And you set your location, and then you export. Did you get that? We're good? Okay. So we're going to be heading into our Unity URP project. And we're going to have to set the scene first before we start making grass. Within a new folder, I'm just going to create a scene. So right click, create, scene. It's good to have new scenes for new things you're creating. Just keeps it easy to understand where things are. Scene. I'll call that grass. And then double click on that. And it should look like this. Empty scene, right? There are a few things you can do here. You could either, one, import your own terrain and grass, or terrain and texture that you worked on last week. But if you don't have that, which is fine, there won't be any penalty. If you go to lab activities, and then if you scroll down, you will see, I'm going to close this quickly, save. You will see there is SM Terrain Mesh 01. This will be our terrain that we're going to be using. You can just download that.
So you want to get our thing from last week?
If you want, you can use the terrain and the texture for that terrain that you used last week, right? If you can export that in time.
Should we also export the other objects or not?
You don't have to, but if you want, you can set dress with those other objects if you want. But the main thing is you want that terrain to then place the grass on, right? So I'm going to download my terrain, and then I'm going to download this is a long name here, tiling plane 01 default material albedo transparency. This is what it should look like, and you're just going to download that as well, right? Yep. Same. So did you put it into Blender already, correct? Just to view it on your model. Wherever that texture is on your computer that you exported it to, you can just take that texture and then place it into Unity. Does that make sense? Like the terrain itself. Yeah, you can export it as an FBX. Make sure you select it, and then export selected only, and then you can plop that in to Unity. That's okay. Yeah, we're gonna work on that. And then you also have your texture ready from that terrain as well? You worked on it though last week. You made your own texture, right? Can you export that texture into Unity? Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, how can I explore the vertex colors on this area?
Is your terrain currently white?
Yeah.
That's okay. We're gonna work on that. We're gonna fix that up.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see when I import new asset, and let's say I downloaded the ones off of the weekly activity. I had downloaded one, and then control select the second one, import. So you'll see now if I drag this terrain into the scene, it's gonna be fully white. Make sure your position's at 0, 0, 0. But right now it should be white, like this. And because we imported that package called the polybrush, you will notice now if you click on the assets tab of your Unity project, you'll see a folder called samples. Do we see samples? We do not see samples. Oh, yes, sorry. One step. We gotta go back to our package manager, search for polybrush again, and you'll see there is an option called samples, right? We're gonna download the shader example for URP. Right, so one, make sure you have polybrush. Two, download shader example, which also requires the shader graph package as well. Yeah, it's right there. This one right here. I'll leave it there for a second. I know it's a lot of things to just download and have, but it's saving you time from making these things yourself, right? That's what packages are for. So, can I get a thumbs up if we have that sample downloaded? Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Excellent. All right. And so now, if you look in your assets, you will see samples. Do we see that? Yeah. So in samples, you'll see polybrush. Click through all the way till shader. And I already took it, but there are two shader graphs here. One is called lit texture blend. The other one is something, I think it's vertex color blend. Let me just check where I put it. You'll find one called lit vertex color, URP. What I did was I dragged this into my current projects folder. So let me see, I'm gonna drag this into where I'm working on the grass, just to make sure you know where it is, right? It's the lit vertex one, lit vertex shader graph. And it's pretty simple. If you double click on this, it's gonna open up the shader graph window. But what it's doing is it's taking our texture that we created, multiplying it with the vertex colors we also specified on that texture, that terrain as well, and then gets a result. So you'll see, oops, with this lit vertex color URP, we can right click, create material, create material. This one's terrain. And the way shader graph works is what you do is you take the shader graph, you drag it onto the material, and it will add itself to that material. See, drag and drop, right? And we have one very simple surface input here called albedo texture. We can just drag and drop this texture that we also made onto that, right? And so this ball here, you'll see it's going to be having that texture applied, right? So I know that's kind of a lot at once, but now what we can do is if we click on our terrain here, there is an option. For you, there might be more options if you accidentally created more materials, but there should be one material slot here called whatever you named your material within Blender. You drag and drop that terrain material onto there and click apply. And it should add the texture with the vertex colors.
Sorry, I created the shader graph, but it did not work.
We didn't create this shader graph. We got this from the samples. Did you download the samples for Polybrush? Yeah.
Right.
And then you just what I did was I dragged that samples into my current project folder just to know where it is. And then you drag and drop that onto your terrain material and then add that material to your terrain. And it should appear like this, right? And we have simple parameters here. We can change the gloss. I like to set the gloss to probably 0.1. From my research, that's sort of how glossy a grassy, rocky material would be in real life. Though, don't quote me on that, but that's what I did. I just set it in here to 0.1, like so, right? The main thing is that we have our terrain here with this texture that we can start adding our grass to, right? So the setup is a little annoying, I know. And to keep myself organized and not confused, I'm going to right click, create a folder, call this terrain, and I'm going to control select these four objects and just put them in there to just keep it out of sight to not get confused with what we're doing next, right? Sounds good. I'm gonna quickly just walk around and make sure everyone's on the right step with the terrain, just because it's a that was a little much to go over. So 1 second. Okay. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you. This is my grass. I'm afraid right here on the floor. It might be a little harder to figure out. It's already like an alpha. Technically, it's just you just plug in RGB. Yeah, that's perfect. You don't have to worry about putting it. Like, yeah, and this is modular, so I can add it later.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I covered 2 lines.
Okay, we are gonna get started on this grass, and we should be getting closer to having this looking like a scene with grass. So what we're gonna do now is, with our project folder here organized, we are going to right click, import new asset, and we're going to go to our directory where we have exported our, you'll see here, oops, our grass albedo transparency that we created within Substance Painter. Remember where you put that, as well as the grass mesh that we created, right? So now we're back to the models that we created. So we're gonna import the grass mesh, and you'll see that we have this X white planes in the scene. Import new asset, also the grass, like so. And that texture should just appear as fully white. I can then change these different tabs here, and then you'll see in alpha, we have our texture, right? So now we have those imported, right? And now this is where we actually create our first shader with shader graph. Oh, it's gonna be fun. We're using literally 4 nodes, so it's not too insane. But here's something: if you want to get extra marks, you can then continue with me as I add extra details to the grass beyond what I expect. Question? I did not apply texture yet. So right now you'll see it's just the plane is put in the scene and it's just white, and I added the texture into my project as well, right? Yeah, right now it's looking weird. You see it's transparent on one side, and then it's not on the other. If we right click in our project tab here, create, and then we're going to create shader graph. You see that? That's a new thing that popped up. You see that? And then from there, URP, lit shader graph. Right, that's why we need, once again, the shader graph package, and it needs to be URP, because URP is the universal render pipeline. Create that. So shader graph, URP, lit shader graph. I'm going to call that grass. And this should look the same as that terrain icon did. It's this blue and white looking thing. We can then right click, create material. This will be the material that we apply the shader to, right? So when I first learned about shaders and shader graph, I was a little confused because I was like, oh, there's the shader and then there's the material. I thought the material was the shader, but the material sort of holds the data of the shader, and then you get parameters that you can then tweak. Say we're going to create the material, name that.
So I don't know if you know, but if you click on top of the shader graph or the shader code and create a material, it's gonna automatically link it. Like you go create,
What?
right click, no,
Oh, right click on it.
grass, create,
Yeah.
click create, and then material. And this material is gonna automatically be assigned
Oh,
to your shader.
that's clever. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a neat trick I learned with Aurora.
Huh. Nice. Well, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna do that, but you can still do the other way. It's the same result.
Well, sure,
So right click on the grass, create material. There you go. So this grass material is linked to this grass shader, right? And then what we can do is if we click on our grass FBX import, we can then drag our material, our grass material, onto our slot here and click apply. And you'll notice right away that this grass changes its color a little gray, a little more gray. That does tell you that it's working, that the material is applied from the, yep.
Mine is having like this weird error for some reason. It's just the zero steps when I do the normal map on that and set normal map to activate on that.
Let me see. Oh, it should look like that. It has a weird, that's, so you'll see that the grass, it looks a little weird. Like the normals kind of blend all together. That's exactly what we did within Blender. When, if I open Blender, actually I don't want to open Blender again. When we set the normals facing upwards, that's good for grass. It's gonna make it look really good. So then we have it like this. Now we can double click on our grass shader graph right here. And it's a brand new window you probably haven't seen before. I'm gonna slowly walk you through this. So introduction, first we have our graph inspector right here. This is very similar to what you would see in a normal material. If I just, for example, create a new material. This is the same, these options right here are the same pretty much as this right here, right? And then we have our vertex and our fragment shaders. We're not going to worry about vertex shader right away. We're going to be worrying about the fragment shader. This vertex is the actual vertices of the mesh that we can manipulate. The fragment is the colors of our mesh that we can manipulate. And so finally, we have on the left side is our parameters that we can add. These are the options that we can then tweak within our material right here, right? So that just exposes them for us to use. First thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our graph inspector. We're going to click allow material override. You see that right there? If everything feels a little congested, you can then shift spacebar to go full screen. Oops, there you go. Shift spacebar will go full screen on whatever viewport you're looking at, right? So you can do that even with the scene. Yeah, right? Shift spacebar is really useful for that. Make sure you don't forget it though, because you'll get stuck in one of your viewports. So I'm going to just shift spacebar into here. Yes, or double click at the top right here, right? Yeah. So allow material override. And you see once we click that option, we're going to see some new tabs appear here. The main ones we're going to worry about is alpha and alpha clip threshold, mostly just alpha right here. So this is going to be the way we're going to access the alpha clip texture we created, right? And if I shift spacebar, you'll see at the top here, before I even go back to the viewport, there's this option called save asset. That's important to then see your updated shader, whatever shader changes you made. So if you click save asset, you'll see nothing changed. But if I click on that grass material, you'll see that these surface options are now available for us to tweak. And so what we're going to be tweaking, I'll show it again. So in our grass shader graph, you're in your grass shader graph, there is a graph inspector, and there is this option called allow material override. You see that? Turn that on. On. And then at the top, you click save asset. Yeah, top left. And now you see these options here. Yeah. You're welcome. So now we can tweak these within our material itself. we're going to change to only. We're changing our render face here from front to both. And you see now all four sides are going to have are going to be visible, right? Versus if it's just on front, we'll only see half of the directions. You see? So turn on render face to both. Right here. Second, alpha clipping, turn that on. Yep.
So the render phase after change to both do not change alpha or render.
Can you see all four faces now?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you apply the material to the grass?
Yeah. It has the grass material that I created.
Interesting. Because it should work.
This is the shader graph that I used. So I had changed here on the shader graph as well, and then here not change. Not change. Like because here was front, but then here I changed to both, and I saved it. Well, because you allow it to override. This is like a separate instance pretty much. Ah, fuck. Yeah. Sorry. That's why I changed it to only. Oh yeah. Not sorry. It's okay.
Yeah. This is a pretty dense informational session here. So render face both, alpha clipping is on, and then cast shadows is off because we don't want to waste. This is grass. There's going to be thousands of grass. We don't want to waste any performance on shadows for our grass. That's just not optimal. Plus, shadows for grass looks bad because grass is so thin anyway. You're not really going to see shadows. So turn cast shadows off as well.
Receive shadows also.
Receive shadows on. That's good because that means when let's say a giant rock or building is casting a shadow, the grass will also be in the shade. That's not heavy on performance, as heavy, right? So that's what our surface options should be in our material here. We're gonna go back to our grass shader. And we're gonna actually do the shading. So if I shift spacebar to go full screen, actually no, I'm gonna stay out of full screen because I'm going to take our grass mesh texture. You'll see this is the one with this grass alpha clipping. Drag that into your shader graph. And it should appear like so. Right? And it should look white like this. And that is because all our information is on this alpha channel right here, this A, right? So a texture PNG image has RGBA channels, which we know pretty well. RGB is the color, and A is the alpha clipping, right? So what we're gonna do is very, very simply drag from the A to the alpha. This is half of our shader done. Right? And so if you click Save Asset, and then you go back to the scene, also, yeah, you will see our grass plane is looking good. Is looking much, much better. So just to reiterate, I imported that grass texture from Substance Painter. I dragged that into the scene or into the shader graph. And then I drag this alpha into alpha right here. And if you don't see alpha here, yeah. If it works, then beautiful. Do you see it? You see it within the project view? Do you see it within the project view though? Excellent. Then that's perfect. Yeah. No, you don't need to worry. It's just good practice to use the alpha channel when you need to, like this. Right? And if you don't see alpha here, once again, graph settings, make sure you have this set to allow material override. And then you should see alpha. Right? And within our scene, we see this. And our shader is set up like this. Right? That's a lot of technical jargon to just throw at y'all. But we should have the grass looking like so. And this is the most optimal way to make grass from my knowledge. So you won't have to worry as much about any performance issues if you do the next steps right. But we're going to get there. So back into our grass here. We're going to create 4 more nodes. So if you click spacebar, you're going to type in lerp. Exactly, linear interpolating. So linear interpolating is probably one of the most useful nodes I've found. It pretty much takes, so T is the input, and a value of 0 will be A, this value right here, A value of 1 in T will be the value of B, right? So whatever we plug into here, it will blend between A and B, right? And can anyone guess what we're gonna be using to blend between on our grass model? We could do that. We could use it for that, but there is something that we set up in our grass model that we can then blend between. Exactly, vertex colors. So this is the coolest part about shader graph is that you can just click spacebar, type in vertex, and you'll see vertex color. It's a ball. Exactly. The Gavin kind.
What'd you say?
It's a ball, the Gavin kind. You see? And we have our vertex color here. And there is the output for, we're going to add that to T, right? And this required us beforehand, remember, in our blender, we added black vertex colors to the bottom of our crossing plane. The color of it right now doesn't matter. We're going to add our parameters to change it. The main thing is that we're using that black and white vertex blend through this vertex color node, right? And you'll see if I plug this into base color and then save and then go back to our scene, our grass will now utilize the vertex colors within the base color instead of just the vertex, right? And so that's how you access the vertex colors. They are not just for coloring, they're also for masking, for putting data in there that you can then access at the mesh level versus just the texture level, right? Yep.
I don't know if it's a Unity 6 thing, but like my thing looks really
Black. It's really dark in there.
No?
No? I think that's a Unity 6 thing. I noticed that with other people that use Unity 6. I don't know what's causing that blurriness. Because I haven't used Unity 6.
Honestly, I really want to just like change it next year.
I don't know if I'll use Unity 6. No, I think you missed. It said
These SSO things, yeah.
I have a fix for you. Here. It might have been where when you painted it by hand, it might have missed somehow getting the corner fully. So here's if you have this problem where some of the bottom is not fully black, but then within Blender it is, it might just be where drawing it by hand is just not getting all the data on there properly.
Yo, Josiah.
Yep.
I solved an issue today. Explain quickly.
Yep.
So for everyone who's using U86 and you're seeing everything kind of fuzzy and dark, it's because SSO or Screen Space Ambient Occlusion is on. You need to go to Assets, Settings, PC Render, and disable it, and then it's gonna like fix itself.
Oh.
It's SSO.
SSAO. It's a screen space ambient occlusion. Yeah. Do you want to fix the grass texture problem? Yeah. So within Blender, if you're having some weird issues with the vertex colors not being black fully, instead of just drawing it by hand, you can just, once as we've done before, I just select the two bottom edges like that. Control tab into vertex paint mode. Select vertex selection, and then Control X to paint it. And it should just fully paint it. You won't see it probably, but that should fix the weird blending issues you were having. And then re-export. Sorry?
Actually, Control X with vertex.
That is only if you're having vertex color problems. Like if it's not fully black at the bottom. If it's not the case for you, then you don't have to worry.
Oh, mine in Blender is like fully black, but then I don't know, it doesn't really seem that it's like that. It looks like it, but sometimes it doesn't. It's confusing. I think it is.
It might be the shading as well of the scene. Yeah, like if I rotate in different directions, you'll see the shading kind of affects it.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
I did that. It's still not working. Now since it doesn't have a detector on it, it's a lot easier to see what's wrong. It's weird.
Show me.
I don't know how to really explain it. Here, yeah, I can.
Okay. We are about to finish the main part of this, and anything extra we do after this will be bonus points. So we're just gonna quickly get to that. So we want our grass here to not just be black and white. We want it to be colors that match our terrain itself. And to do that, we're going to go back into our shader graph here. And you see these two lerp inputs. We don't want to tweak them every single one of these by hand because that will take too long. Instead, we're going to create two color parameters on the left here. I'm just going to call this color 1. Make another color. Color 2. So two grass color parameters, both set as color datas. And then I'm going to set color 1 maybe. So you'll see if I click on it, node settings, this will appear on the right side. I'm going to set this to like a bright-ish, desaturated kind of yellow color to start, something like that. And then color 2, I'm going to set that to like a slightly more bluish green, light bluish green like this, like that. I'm going to drag these in. So these are parameters, and we can edit these within our material itself. And this will allow us to get the result we want really, really easily and quickly. So just drag color 1 into A, color 2 into B. And it should turn one of those colors that you set it to. And if you click Save Asset, you will see that we have that beautiful gradient happening, right? And then at this point, because if you look at a material here, these exposed surface inputs here, we can then tweak to our heart's content to kind of blend it into the ground better, right? And you can see that it's looking pretty solid, all things considered, right? And so our shader there is done pretty much for now. I'm gonna add more later, just because I feel like I want to do some cool stuff with it. But at this point, the grass mesh is done. But we want to paint this on whatever surface we're building it on quickly. We don't want to just manually place over and over and over and over. That's horrible. That'll take forever, right? And so the way we're going to do this is we're going to speed it up with the add-on called Polybrush that we installed. So before we even open Polybrush, we're going to quickly right-click in our hierarchy here, or our projects folder here, create. You will find prefab right here. So prefab will be an instance object that then we can repeatedly place all around our mesh using Polybrush. So you see right there, prefab, click it.
Prefab's not giving you resets.
Where is it then?
It's on scene.
It's in scene?
Yeah. You have to
Prefab? Yes, correct. Say it again.
We just grab the grass and scene view and then just drag it into the folder view and work it in.
Yes, actually, they would do that as well. If you drag the grass into here, it's going to create a prefab, but you got to make sure the position will be a little offset depending on where you place the grass in the scene, which is why I prefer, instead of doing that, I like to create a brand new prefab because that will be set to 0, 0, 0. There won't be any weird scaling issues. And if I double click on the prefab, it's just going to be a blue void with nothing except the grass parent prefab. And then from here, what we can do is we can drag our grass FBX right up here to then place that in our prefab. And you will see, because I set the pivot, or we set the pivot near the bottom here, the pivot you'll see is right there. If I set it to pivot up here, just to view, you can see the pivots right there. And make sure the position is 0, 0, 0. You can leave the rotation at this weird number, -89, or just set it to 0. Actually, don't set it to 0. That's just the importing reorientation that it does. You can just leave the rotation as is. I believe I imported it wrong, and that's why it's doing that. So just be careful about things like that. But you can see that this is what it should look like, and the position is 0, 0, 0. That's the most important thing, right? And what we can do is we can, for lighting, we can just disable cast shadows because we don't really want shadows for this grass because that will be extra draw calls, extra performance lost. We do not want that. And lastly, if we click on our grass up here, the parent, we can then convert this to static. And that is, it's not essential, but that's really useful because it's going to drastically reduce our draw calls. So that's for performance, right? Draw calls are pretty much the amount of times the GPU has to call the CPU to get information, if I remember correctly. If it's static, then it's going to automatically chunk all those grass pieces as one giant calculation. So it's like it tells the CPU tells the GPU, hey, can you make this grass texture or this grass image, plane image, and these are the transforms, place it on all these areas versus saying, can you place it here, can you place it here, can you place it here, can you place it here? It's like, can you place this in all these places, right? So that's what static does here. It just instances, which saves a ton of performance for games. And that's how you can have millions of grasses, but even then you got to be performance, right? And then you save it. You can delete this grass mesh because that one's just a default mesh that we place in the scene. And so now we just have this prefab ready to go, right? And this is where we tap into that polybrush. So you'll see at the top here, I hope it's the same for Unity 6. There is a tools option. Do you see that? It says polybrush. If you downloaded the package, polybrush window, click on that, right? And so this window, I believe it just appears like there. It just randomly appears. You can take that and drag it. I like to drag it into right beside the inspector here. It just makes it easier to kind of keep that out of sight, and you can just switch in between the inspector and polybrush. Do you see at the top, there's tools? Yeah, tools, polybrush, polybrush window. And that will create this cool little thing here, right? We're not going to use pretty much most of these tabs. There is a sculpt terrain tool, which is cool. You can just sculpt the terrain within Unity. It's really fun, but it's not what we're using. There's brush option, there's a vertex color option, there's a foliage option, which is what we're going to use. And then there is, what's the last one? Texture paint. But we're using this one here, this option called, is it the prefab scatter, right? So it's right there. I already placed a grass mesh here from before. I'm just going to not worry about that. What we're going to do is we're going to take that grass prefab we made. So wherever you put it in your project, drag it into your palette here, and it should appear. Right? Right there. And so we're going to click the check mark on it, and it will now appear in a brush loadout. So the brush loadout is when we're about to paint, it's going to paint the things in the brush loadout only. And then we can turn this little, yep. There's like, are you talking about this tab here? Yeah. So there's a lot of different tabs I'm showing you today. But yeah, you see, are you here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you dragging and dropping your prefab into the current palette here?
There's nowhere for me to drag it on.
Is there not?
Well, I
Hmm. There you go. Okay, good. And so if we click a check mark on it, it's going to appear in our brush loadout, as I stated, right? You're going to set this slider to max so that it's placing it at the full intensity. You see, if I hover over the terrain here, this appears, this little like cursor here. I'm going to click on our terrain in the hierarchy because whatever you click on in the hierarchy, whatever's yellow, it will make sure to only place on that mesh. If you don't select the terrain and you just kind of drag, it might make weird offsets of the grass, but you just make sure you click on the terrain before you start painting. And now we finally can paint the grass on our terrain. You can just start dragging it all around, right? And what I like to do is I like to change the radius bigger up here, just turn these up. I like to click on the current grass mesh and turn on some randomization of the scale a little bit, and then randomize the rotation a bit like this, just to give it some variance, right? You see if I click here, you'll see you turn on these arrows here. If I place new grass here now, oops, just erase these. The grass will be different heights, as well as I turn on randomized rotation. And I turn that on and I set this from 0 to 360. So every time I place a new instance of grass, there is a random chance that it will be any rotation along the y-axis only. I would not recommend turning on the other randomized rotations because it will, for grass at least, because it's gonna like the grass will be like upside down and it's gonna look really really silly, right? So we can just start drawing grass. And because I set the scale a little bit, you see this slider, I can just like set a range for the scale to be like randomized in. The grass won't feel as uniform and flat and boring, right? Yeah, this is the part where you just kind of draw out some cool grass. Right? It's a little slow from my experience using this tool, but this is how you do foliage for specifically for smaller pieces of terrain or smaller sets. If you're doing a giant landscape, you're going to be using the terrain tool. Yeah, question? Really? What's your frequency set to? Oh. And you can't just like hold down and drag like this?
Yeah, it seems kind of buggy. It's happening to me as well. Yeah.
Is it?
My guess it has to do with humidity sets.
Maybe. If
You start dragging it and it stops. You have to take a few times to get it to start working.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that too. To avoid like this tool is a bit buggy. This was the best way I could show you the grass from all the tools I researched. I like to avoid that. I try to click on the terrain first, kind of hold my cursor in one spot for a few seconds, and then start dragging. You might have to click a few times to get it going, but yeah. And if you're having that issue with the uniform not placing grass, you can just disable it. Really? Let me just check that out. Okay. Oh, yeah. I'll come to you really quickly. So at this point, this is the result that you can submit for the lab activity. I would recommend you to create some creative additions to this, like you can change the colors to be really exotic. You can follow along with me because I'm going to continue working on this until the class is over. I'm going to add some simple scrolling colors and textures and maybe some movement if we get there. If you do all that, then you'll get full marks for sure. But the time is now yours. You can stay. You can work on this more. I'll come around and ask some questions, answer questions, and I'll just continue working on this. But yeah, thank you so much for making this grass. I'll be helping around. Okay, real quick, I have a lot of, so I'm noticing a lot of people having issues where their grass is rotated 90 degrees when it shouldn't be. And that's caused when you drag your grass mesh from the scene and create a prefab like that, that's causing that problem, right? So you don't want to drag it in to the scene like this because that transform is then becoming applied as a rotation so that when it instances onto the grass or to the terrain, it's going to be set like this. So we're not going to drag to create a prefab. We're going to right click in our project view and then create a prefab as such. Or if you're in Unity 6, it's going to be under scene and then prefab. So create a prefab like this. And then you can name it your grass. And then from there, you see how there is this parent here that is set to 0, 0, 0. That's good. That's what we want because when we instance grass into the terrain, it's going to be set to that transform, right? And so then you would take the grass and then drag that in like such. And that's because I believe the rotation got messed up on import. So that is on me, but this alleviates that problem. If you save this and then you add this new grass into that polybrush palette.
I think your rotation is fine. It's just like blenders default orientations are different.
Yes, they are different. In case some people are having issues where the rotation is 90 degrees, that's just to help those people. Yeah. So that's the way you alleviate that problem. Yeah. Yep.
When you circle around it, in the shader graph, you can turn on ambient occlusion. Yeah. Turn on or off, and you can also set the smoothness to 0 if you don't like it when you spin around the scene.
Oh yes, I thank you for that. Yeah. There is also, if you don't like how shiny it is, right, you go back into the grass here, and there's this option called smoothness. And you can set that to 0.1. And if you save it, the grass will not be as shiny and jarring to look at as it once was. And that helps it blend more with the terrain. Because the terrain is also set, I also set the terrain to 0.1. So that helps it blend better, right? All right, so while we still have some time, I'm gonna quickly just try to make some cool wind effects and just movement. This will be a bit technical, so I hope you can follow along. This is very optional. But I'm just gonna place a little more grass. Make sure I select it first. Just try to drag, drag, drag. All right, here's my grass. Just back into here. There is the vertex tab, which we have not touched yet. We're gonna make a little wind motion effect here to the best of my abilities. So let's start by creating a node, click spacebar. We're gonna type in position. And then click on the top one. Position is pretty much the object's position in the world. As we see here, space, world, set to world. We want to set it to object though, because we want the wind to affect it by a per object basis. Because if we set to world, all the grass is just going to be gone. It's going to be just shifted off the map. Yeah, it would be really funny though. Because we are making local changes, not global. However, the wind effect is going to be global, right? So we're going to duplicate this position and then create that, set that to world. So this one's going to be based on our wind. Our wind's going to be moving along on the global axis. And so what can we use to make cool looking noise? If you click create node by clicking spacebar. If you type in Voronoi, we're gonna get that. That's gonna be what we're using to simulate that procedural wind movement. And you're more than welcome to like change the density a little bit, offset a little bit, not too much, because we're gonna do most of that with the tiling. I'll show you what the tiling is. But if you type spacebar and click tiling and offset, this is the way you can manipulate the size of the texture. So this texture here. If I drag this out into the UV0 right here, nothing will happen. But then you'll notice if I change the offset, it's going to start moving this UV. And if I change the tiling, it's going to change the scale. Right? And so first we're going to take this position. We're going to type it split. So this is, I'm going to quickly go through this because I don't have too much time. Split pretty much takes the vector 3 of the XYZ of the position, puts it into 3 float channels that we can then access each one independently. And because our wind is going to go along like the horizontal plane of our world, we're only going to use I'm pretty sure it's R and B. Because I'm pretty sure G is going to be straight up. Yeah. Because in Unity, Y is usually up, right? So from the UV2 on tiling and offset, you're going to create a vector 2. See this? So we're pretty much we're splitting these 3 values into separate mono channels, taking R and B, and adding them in like so. And you'll see here, you're going to have warping on this axis, but then you're going to have the top and bottom will have that perfect Voronoi being warped along it. And from there, we can then add a new node, click time. Time is the way you can do procedural animations with shaders and whatnot. Very performant, very good for what we're making. We can then drag from there, type in multiply, right? Because time is very fast by default. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our first parameter on the right side or left side. Create a float, call it speed, or maybe more descriptive, grass speed float. And by default, I'm going to click on it by default, and then over here on the right side, set this to 0.1. I find that works the best to start by default. And if we drag that grass speed into our view, we can then drag that into our multiply. And then drag this out into offset, right? And look at that. You can see our Voronoi noise here is starting to move a bit, right? Yeah, it's so crazy. So we're almost there. We're going to now create another parameter. Call this one use a float. Call this one grass, or sorry, wind size, And I'm actually going to rename the grass speed to wind speed because that makes more sense. So wind speed is a float value set at 0.1. Wind size is a float value also set to 0.1. I'm going to drag that wind size parameter into tiling. Right? And now that noise pattern is much bigger. Right? And we're almost there. Now we got to just multiply. So this is what the node setup looks like right now. Let's leave it like that. Now we got to multiply this offset to our position right here. So if we multiply, or no, sorry, not multiply, my bad. It's add. So drag out, click, make an add, out, and then drag that into position. It might be super strong right away. Let's see. So this is what it looks like. Oh wow. Yeah, that's maybe it's a little too strong, guys. It's yeah, that's crazy. Maybe, yeah. I think we're adding a too big of a value in. So what we can do to fix that is we can add a multiply here. Oops. It's a bit complicated, I know. So there you go. And then add one more float. Wind, maybe intensity, right? That was funny.
No, yours are like big. Mine just looks like, I don't know if you can see, there's like stuff walking.
Oh wow, they're just moving around. I'm gonna set this parameter to 0.001 or 0.5. So see wind intensity 0.005. Drag that in. And multiply that in with our Veroni here. So now it's only it's only slightly changing our offset. Right? And actually, one more multiply. Shaders can be a little annoying because you got to add a lot of nodes to get something. And to avoid the bottom moving as well, if we multiply with our vertex colors, which we set the bottom, whoops, we set the bottom to black and the white to top. So it's only going to move the top of the grass instead of the bottom, right? So this is the full setup here. Let me just make sure this even works. Yes. We got some movement on our grass, right? And see, now we have these parameters here. I can then tweak. If I hold, is it control? I can fine tune it a lot more. It is 0.002. Let's make it very subtle. Yeah, see, that adds so much, and that's all really performant. Yeah, of course. I'm going to leave this up now, just for a second. So this is the setup for that. It's a lot. But if you do this, then I'm going to reward you for that with marks. So that's how it's set up. Yep.
Why is the changes? And for some reason, yours is really big. Well, that's the
I think I figured out why. I can't.
It's like
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I just said mine with the core. So
Okay, I actually see
the
it.
way I did this was simply putting it in. I'll put it in. Oh, it says like that. That's so sick. So yeah. I mean, considering I made my grass little and stuff, I was like, okay, why not do what? Next. I know that's actually I'll bring that up too. Right. And hey, if you do want to export those grass meshes into a different application, mind you, the shader setup won't work because every single 3D application has a different way of setting up shaders. But if you do want to export all of those planes with those transforms like so, you can do that. If you create a new like if you go to Window or wherever it is in UV6, go to Package Manager, and if you install the FBX exporter, let that load for a second. Close this, close this.
Yeah, the FX exporter is really useful because you can, whatever changes you make into the scene, you can then export, and it's all instancing still, right? If I select the terrain mesh, and then if I right click it, I can export to FBX. You can see right there. And I'll give you this drop down here. But if I keep instances on, then it's going to keep those grass planes in where they should be. I'm gonna set this to binary. Binary is better for exporting. And I'm setting my directory to the grass. Everything else should be set normally. If I export it now, you'll see a new terrain pops up, and it has those grass instances already placed on it. And that you could take this and then bring that into something like Blender. Like, let me actually see if I can show that really quickly. If you want your diorama to be in Blender, but you want those transforms of the grass, you could do that, you know? TA, grass. Right? Oh, whoops. I'm just gonna drag that in. Import. See? Look at all those beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And they all should be using the same material, right? And this is pretty much the opposite process. We're just gonna recreate our shader within Blender. So I'm just gonna add the vertex colors back. There you go. But you see, let me just turn off also the relationship lines. If I click on one of these grasses and then I base color, image texture, and I go to the tutorial and I click on the grass. See? And if I set the alpha channel to alpha, see? They are all clipping the way that they should. And then this is where you then recreate this entire shader setup within Blender itself, right? You would then take the color attribute, right? That's the grayscale. See? Same thing here. And then you would create a color ramp, for example. And then now you can set these to different colors, right? Have a darker bluish color, greenish color, maybe like a white, like a brighter color, right? The fundamental understanding is the same, but the application is different, right? See, this setup is, I don't know why that's there. There. See? It's the same exact setup, just with a different coat of paint, right? If I go back here, you see we have our alpha clipping from that texture, and then our vertex color blending between two colors into base color. Same thing applies in Blender. You have your alpha clip texture, the alpha connected to the alpha, and then the vertex colors are blended between these two colors right here, right? Mind you, the lighting's looking really strange in here for now. But yeah, shaders are cool, guys. Take my word for it. I could add a HSL for the terrain itself. I could change things like the saturation a bit, make it more saturated green, right? Beautiful. Right? Shaders are cool, and they are your friend. So yeah, if you if you stayed longer and finished the wind as well, then you are gonna get that bonus extra mark. So I'll consider that as well. You can also change the color of the grass, the different types of alpha clipping. But yeah, thank you all so much for sticking with me through all this. This was a lot, I know. We covered so many different topics throughout this whole tutorial today. But yeah, I can't wait to see all your results. I can't wait for the submissions. Thank you so much. Oh, a second round of applause. Thank you. And see you next week for our last lab. I'm pretty sure it's the last lab. I'm really upset about that. This one, it's more of a special one. It's just going to be about lighting your scene, probably within different engines. But that one's not as mandatory. Just if you feel like this week was a lot, you can just skip next week. But it's still fun to be there for the last session. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I don't know yet. They haven't released the applications or like the who's getting the position for the CG TAing yet. I don't know. But I will include this tutorial a part of my portfolio for that to show I can make